Jay Hiv, Stretford, Paddock, that's Joe Smith. Brighton 0, Manchester United 2. A good win, a solid win for United. Obviously, the slight downside to today is Manchester City have won their 4th Premier League title in a row, albeit with 115 charges hanging over their head. But we're not going to talk about them. We're going to talk about Manchester United. That is what matters. Goals from Diogo Dalot and Rasmus Højlund. The perfect way to end the Premier League season and go into the FA Cup final. Yep. Joe, to be honest with you, right, and I want you to bear with me here when I explain myself. It felt a little bit like United of old. And I mean like Pete United, like Pete years United. And the reason I mean that is, there's times when United used to win things and dominate, and we'd go away to tricky grounds, and it wouldn't be the most exciting game. Yeah. And we wouldn't do loads that were amazing, but we'd get a result. Yeah. And it'd be comfortable. Yeah. And you'd leave the ground thinking, well, that was a nice day out. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it felt a bit like that today. Not too much pressure. Brighton had the moments. We cleared one off the line, a couple of other bits and pieces, but I think United were pretty good value for a win in a season that's been pretty, poor.
Bereft of those sorts of results. It was an interesting one, wasn't it? First half, I thought Brighton were the better team. United looked poor again. And then second half, Brighton just switched off completely. I know they still had a few shots and a few chances, but second half, United comfortably deserved to win, I thought. And first half, Brighton looked about as good as we did in the second half. But as United knows this season from some of the games that we've lost late on and goals were conceded late on, the second half really matters more than the first half. Because by then it's too late to change it. And I thought the subs worked. I thought we were seeing there the value of having good players on the bench, which is obviously not something Ten Hag's avoided on purpose, but due to the injuries we've had almost no options off the bench. Being able to bring Rashford, Varane, Eriksen, Højlund off the bench 2 games in a row, in Højlund in particular, has brought us 2 extra goals and 2 wins. Yeah. Like, it's not a coincidence that when you've got more than 11 players fit, or in the case of United over the last month, probably 8 players fit, with 3 players either out of position or playing with injury or whatever, that is much better. Having extra players is much better than having 8 players. Yeah. And for some reason, we it's hard to remember that when you're watching and you're seeing United lose and you think, why can't they do anything? Why do we not look like changing the game? Why are things getting worse as the game goes on? Because they've had no options. Bringing Højlund on has genuinely made a difference to the tune of 2 goals in the last 2 games. No, it's a big thing, and United, I think, deserved to win the game. Brighton had a bit of an end of season. Who cares about them? But I'm not going to be annoyed at winning a game just because the opposition weren't great. But it was good to see United putting a couple of wins together, because our season isn't over. Brighton's is. They can do what they want. Ours isn't. No. And we've got the biggest game, I would say, in 8 years at Manchester United coming up next week. The FA Cup final, when was the last one? 2018, 6 years. This is United's biggest game in 6 years coming up at the weekend. Yeah. Like, we have to know that, and we have to take that seriously. And winning games to get a bit of momentum, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference because City have got all the momentum in the world and they've got a better squad, but it's better than losing those games. I'm really happy that we won today. I really am.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying we weren't great, and I'm not saying it was a vintage performance by any stretch of imagination, but I don't think it was that bad.
It wasn't.
In all honesty, I don't. I thought Brighton had moments, like I said. I don't think they were particularly good, and I think United did enough to win. And that's, I'll take that in a minute, because I think this season, like you said, it's been, performances and wins have been few and far between. And okay, you might say the performance is great, but just getting a comfortable win away at a difficult ground, we needed that. We needed to be going into this FA Cup final with a little bit of momentum, and that's what we've got. I know it's not loads, but back-to-back wins going into the cup final is something. And if you look at United's sort of record before the Newcastle game, it was something like 2 wins in 10 games or something. Yeah. We've now got 2 in 2. Yeah. That's much better, obviously. Hisham El Said says, this hurts, but relying on perennial chumps like Arsenal to beat 115 charges, Abu Dhabi, human rights abusing FC to the league will never work. It can only be us to sort this league out. GGMU, UTFP. I think that's a great point there.
It's shit, really, isn't it? It's hard to get more points than City, because they get 90 points a year, no matter what. And if you want to beat them, you have to get more than that. And it's not easy. But, I don't know, realistically, no one has really looked like doing them in the last few years for me. City just get in this zone, and don't they? And then they just win. And by the last game of the season, every year, even if they have to win on the last day like they did today, it's relatively sure that City are going to do it. So I feel disappointed and annoyed, and I wish United had won 4 in a row, and I wish City hadn't, and all that. But I'm not surprised, I'm not shocked, and I'm not that gutted, because this is what the Premier League has become, isn't it?
Yeah.
City have sort of, supposedly, according to the Premier League's lawyers, who, maybe they know less about football law than me, but probably not, they may have broken a few rules along the way.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I know we said we weren't going to go on about City, but I just want to mention this. Because Sam Pilger, who's been on the channel, made a good point. He said, he tweeted out, Manchester City winning 2 Premier League titles while having 115 charges for rule violations is a dreadful look for the Premier League. Yeah. No wonder their chief executive doesn't want to hand them the trophy in person. Whether you think City are guilty or not, it isn't a great look when you've got this sort of elephant in the room and it's still not being sorted and they keep winning Premier League trophies. That's like the second one they've won whilst these charges are hanging over their heads.
Yeah.
So it does need sorting out one way or the other. I have my doubts whether we'll see anything substantial come of it, but it needs to happen, because until it happens, City fans are going to say we're not guilty, people are jealous, we're bad by the rules, they move the goalposts, all that jazz. Everyone who's not a City fan will say you're cheating, that's why you're so dominant, all the rest of it. You'll get some journalists who are a bit like in the middle. We've seen journalists say, well, they might have 115 charges, but they still got in mind what they do. I think there's a lot of that going on. It is a bit of a mess. Also, I think there's been some City fans in the chat. That's insane to me. Yeah. You've just won the Premier League title. Your manager's probably giving a speech and you're watching a Manchester United channel. Fair play to you. Thank you. Don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. Mokhtar Rashid says Ten Hag should just go away. Listen, Mokhtar, I'm not going to have that language on this channel, yeah? Just
vile.
Yeah,
criticise him, but don't descend into just sort of abuse like that.
Ten Hag should just go away. I've added a just. Should go away.
That's vile.
That's
Can we report him? Can we not just to the YouTube sort of mods, but to the police?
Yeah.
Can we get an official police report on that, please? Go away.
Do you think that Ten Hag has done himself any favours towards the end of this season? Has he rallied a little bit? Does it matter? Or is it Dave Sexton in 2000, behave, in 1981?
Oh, yeah, let me just think back to when I was minus 12.
Yep.
Yes, it's very similar, Jay.
Yep.
Obviously, I know it's legal to be aware of things that happened before you were born.
I'm glad you said that.
History.
It's like getting a question, who fought the World War? I don't know, I wasn't alive.
I don't know, Rolf Harris.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? No, he had his own battle going on. But what I will say is,
one day
we're in a situation.
Reference Rolf Harris on this channel.
Yeah, sorry. We're in a situation with Erik Ten Hag now that we have never been in my lifetime as a Manchester United fan.
Love that.
Where
Santa Not says Sexton in 1979 is closer. Is that when it was?
There you go.
I thought, yeah.
You got the dates wrong, you fool. We've finished 8th in the Premier League, which is the worst I've ever seen, worst we've ever finished in the Premier League, and yet we might not sack him. And there's a lot of people, journalists, fans, people on the inside of these things, rumours coming out of the club, that he could keep his job next season. That's never happened before. So I don't know what counts as helping him or not. And, Ratcliffe talks every 2 weeks about the structures need to be changed. We're not thinking about the manager, or it's not about the manager, it's about changing the structures. Does that mean that the manager can lose 20 games in a row and keep his job? Probably not. But does it mean that he's going to get sacked just because we've had one bad year? We also don't know that either.
Yeah.
Like, it's a bizarre situation. Any other season, any other owners, or not saying other owners, the Glazers, which are the other owners that we've had since the channel's existed, if we're sat here now, we're going, right, he's got the FA Cup, and then what we getting, De Zerbi or Tuchel? Do you know what I mean? That's the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas now, I would say probably 60-40 that he'll keep his job.
That's it.
Regardless of the cup final performance and result. I think if he wins it, it goes to sort of 65-35, maybe even 70%.
No, I think that makes a difference. Yeah. Santa Not says Sexton had us winning our last 7 games in a row in 81. That's what I'm getting at. Like, he could win his last 2 games. He could even win the FA Cup and still get sacked.
Yeah.
Like, because Sexton got sacked, didn't he, for Ron Atkinson after that. Like, you can still have a little flurry and it not be enough. I think that INEOS aren't that reactive. I think there is something going on where they've thought, this is the plan, and it's not just about whether we turn up next week.
And there's another point to be made here as well, is that we should know by now who's our manager is going to be next season. Once let's say 24 hours post FA Cup, because obviously if we win, it was unfair on Louis van Gaal that he found out he was losing his job the day we won the FA Cup. That's not fair. So let's say we win the FA Cup. You have 24 hours after that. Enjoy it, celebrate, go out that night, wake up the next day, and your job is still safe. By the following evening or whatever, we need to know who Man United's manager is going to be next season.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you announce the new one straight away because you might not know, but we can't be going into like a week, 2 weeks. The Euros have started, the Euros have ended, and we don't know if Ten Hag's here or not. They have to come out within a day or two of the FA Cup final and say he's staying or he's going and De Zerbi's coming in, or McKenna,
and also
or
you're
Tuchel,
right, because
players,
some players care who the manager's going to be.
Of course they do.
And if you're going, come and sign for United, right, who's the manager going to be? Well, for starters, the manager coming in is going to have his own targets. But if the club has targets, because we keep hearing players that the club like, if they do, and you're saying to them, right, come in, then they might have a preference as whether they want to play for Erik ten Hag or Roberto De Zerbi. So it doesn't make any sense to sort of drag it out. You've had enough time now. INEOS came in what? I can't remember. Was it?
Well, it was the Christmas Eve officially.
Right. Oh yeah, of course.
Is when it was announced. But they've been looking at the squad for presumably 18 months. Yeah. They've been looking at this squad and the manager since they were in conversations to buy the club. Because if they didn't know what they were buying. Like, you know what I mean? If I'm looking for a new phone online, I know what camera it's got before it arrives in my hand. Because otherwise, what did they think they were buying? So they should know, like you're saying. They should have probably had a decent idea whether they liked Ten Hag generally before they bought the club. They should now have a very good idea of any sort of inner workings that have hampered him and his ability to succeed this season and last season, and how much the injuries have hurt him. They should know all of that by now, or thereabouts. And even if they don't know it, tough luck. There's a new season starting in 2 months, and you've got to have a manager for then. So it don't matter really whether they think they've got to make a decision in a rush or not. We can't not have a manager. And by now, really, 19th of May, City have already announced one signing. Is it Savio they've already announced? Like, other teams are making big moves already. And we've got to know who our manager is and who the targets are before the end of the season. If not, should have happened already, really, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should. Burnside is back, says feelings about the manager aside, ownership situation finally shifts, FA Cup final, win it, and I might have taken this at the start of the season. That one game's massive now. I'll name this podcast later, says Jay. There are no Man City fans. It's a fallacy. UTP. Yeah, Zach says City fans are obsessed with us. They always have been, bro, to be honest with you. HP Anafi says Erik ten Hag, basically better than De Zerbi. Ak Shitzraj says, conspiracy theory this, Glazers don't want another Fergie who will be more powerful than them. That's why they overpay for players who they could have got cheaper a month earlier. I mean, I'm all for conspiracy theories. Just on this season then, how much sort of leeway can you give Ten Hag because of the injuries, because of the changing ownership, because of the Sancho situation?
Yeah.
I mean, whether you blame him or not for that, because of the Marcus situation. When I say the Marcus situation, I mean, obviously everything's not been great. Marcus, the Belfast incident, his form's deserted him. How much do you blame Erik ten Hag, and how much you go, well, actually, he's had things going on and they're out of his control, like injuries, for example.
How many points did we get last season? Do you remember? Was it 75 points?
Let's have a look. Have a look.
If you find that, I think United are on 60 points this season, is what we've ended on. I think, and before we see that,
so we got 75 points last season. You're right, nailed it.
And it's 60 this season, isn't it? To be honest, I think the injury difference, because we obviously had some injuries last season, but the difference between last season and this season, how many more we've had, would be somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 points less than we got last season. All the things being equal, which obviously they aren't, because everything changes every second, let alone year in, year out. How many points have we got this season?
60.
Right. So the idea that we've got 15 points, what's that, 5 losses more this season than last season. I know it's not just losses, but...
Well, it is.
But I mean, the wins, losses and draws aren't exactly the same.
No, but we lost 9 last season.
Yeah.
And we've lost 14 this season.
And you would
So
hope we'd find a way to mitigate that.
15 if you wanted to break it. I know it's not just that, but I get your point.
Yeah, but I think somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 points worse off than last season is sort of what I would expect with the amount of injuries we've had. The problem for me is the style of play seems to have gone backwards as well. And obviously you would get a little bit of that with injuries, but I'm still waiting for consistent ways to stop opposition having 20 shots a game. That massively worries me. In-game changes worries me. The lack of willingness to sort of change things up as the season's gone on until recently worries me. But I think if you said to me, United are probably going to be 10 to 15 points worse off than last season because of all these injuries, I'd go, probably are, yeah.
You're right. I mean, the points thing I get, but you've nailed it. Like, watching that game against Bournemouth, for example, disgraceful performance. Yeah. The game against Fulham, pathetic. Brentford. Palace at home, Brighton at home, Galatasaray at home,
Newcastle in the
Carabao.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been performances that have just been embarrassing, and yes, everything you've said I agree with about. I would expect a drop off because of the injuries. We have had key players missing at difficult times as well, where we've really needed them. But still, some of those performances have been absolutely abject.
Yeah,
they have, and it's just there's no excusing that. And I know you're not trying to. I'm just saying for me that's the issue I've got, and that's the issue I think it's going to do for Ten Hag. It's not just numbers on a board. It's not just we got 60 points this season, we got 75 last season. I lost all these players. That's a 15-point difference if you think about it. I think the issue is you've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Dave Brailsford, Jean-Claude Blanc, Jason Wilcox now sat in the ground.
Yeah.
They ain't Joel and Avram, who can't even spell football, let alone watch it. They watch the games. They have opinions. They have a decent amount of knowledge around football. They've been around it all their lives.
Yeah.
So even though Dave Brailsford isn't necessarily a footballing
Jason
person,
Wilcox has won the Premier League.
He's won the Premier League.
He knows football.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he knows football. And obviously, Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been watching football. He's like, he'll have an opinion. And when he sat there watching the team he's just spent £1 billion to acquire a share of, getting battered off Bournemouth or whatever, as the crowds are booing, he's going to think, Now, he might be sort of more long-term and be like, you know what, this is the short-term pain, long-term, we've got the right guy. Or he might be like, I can't stomach this isn't working, we need to change. I don't know, because one thing that INEOS have done that the Glazers never did is they've been very, very sort of coy. They've kept the cards close to the chest, and there's not really any leaks about it. We've had journalists on this channel, we have them on every week, and we ask them on the channel, on air and off air, and it's the same thing, like, no one really knows. Yeah. Abhinav Verma has been a member of the Academy for 37 months. I saw the 99 documentary, and honestly, the stuff the media keeps saying of players not happy were common back then, even, but more professionals. Yep. Kajel Martry says, De Zerbi is ready the day after Allegri is fucked off. That's the math with that.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Him going back to Italy.
Yeah.
You can see why that.
Do you know what? We'll wrap it up there. We're going to do a proper in-depth look at the season tomorrow, also throughout the week. Me, Joe, McCullough, Howson will be on doing bits as well, going over what's happening next season, looking at it towards the FA Cup final, looking at the season, looking at Erik Ten Hag and his future, going through all that stuff. It's been a disappointing Premier League campaign. It's been almost as bad as I could have imagined.
Yeah.
I think the only way this would have been slightly worse is if the Scousers had won the league. Yeah. That's about it. I mean, if you'd have said to me, what's the lowest realistically see United finishing next season? 6th probably would have been my answer. Yeah. To finish 8th and to endure some of the results we've mentioned earlier has been abysmal. Yeah. But it is where we are. And at least, I mean, it could be more pain. We've got the possibility of winning an FA Cup final against Manchester City.
Game, that.
Ross Murphy's been a member of the Academy for 44 months, says, as much as it's been a disappointing season, Stretford Paddock is always a joy. We go again next season. Come on, United,
yes.
UCP. Thank you, Ross.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone, as well, for your support this season, this Premier League season. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere. Back later on. We're back in a minute, actually, with Andy Tate, and then we'll have Stephen Howson's reaction to the Brighton game and get their take on what they've made of the Premier League season. Joseph.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, this Premier League campaign.
It's worst one ever, Jay.
I know.
Fucking hell.
You've made it bearable.
Unreal,
and that's the biggest compliment I can give you.
Thank you. So have you.
Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. That's been Joe Smith. I'm Jay Moy. This has been a review. Manchester United's win at Brighton. Thanks for watching.